Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Spilling Tea with the G's. I'm Nick Galarakis. Along with me, of course, is my co-host, Steve Galarakis. You want to say hello?
How you doing, everybody?
We like to make fun of each other. So we are excited. This is our sixth episode. Sixth episode. Hard to believe we've already done 5 so far. This is our sixth. We are pleased and excited to have the Dear Jack folks, Andrea Schwartz.
Episode 7.
It is number 7, isn't it? We've done 6 so far.
Episode 7. Get it together.
This is number 7. This is what happens. So my life. So Andrea and Kayla, welcome. How are you both doing today?
Thank you. Hi. Thanks for having us. We're doing good. Yeah. So, well, I don't want to speak for Kayla, but I am doing good.
We're just talking we statements the whole time. I am good. I am doing good. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Of course. Absolutely. As far as talking in we statements, I think that that's just nature of the beast when it comes to Steve and I being the older brother. I speak for him all the time, whether he likes it or not. So
He just shakes his head.
Pretty much. So, hey, Andrea and Kayla, again, like I said, thank you both for joining us today. We obviously love both of you and pumped to have you both on, and obviously want to talk a little about yourselves, but of course, too, what the Dear Jack Foundation is all about and the great things you guys are doing for the cancer community. Before we dive into the Dear Jack stuff, I would love just for you both to kind of talk a little about yourselves. Why are you part of the cancer community and drew you to Dear Jack? So I guess, Andrea, I'm going to throw it to you first. Since you're technically the boss, right?
Well, again, thanks so much for having us today. My name is Andrea Schwartz, and I'm the executive director of the Dear Jack Foundation. And I've been with Dear Jack for probably just over 5.5 years now. I can't believe it's been that long. Time certainly does fly. I guess what originally attracted me to coming to Dear Jack and representing the organization as the executive director is the opportunity to serve an underserved or under-resourced demographic and really do everything in my power to close the gap in resources that are available for the AYA demographic. As time went on, that passion really became more personal for me. A couple of years ago, my best friend of 30 years was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. I still get emotional about it. Luckily she's doing well now, but just being by her side through her treatment, I just witnessed firsthand really the challenges that the young adult demographic face when they are diagnosed with a cancer diagnosis. I stood by her and watched her try to go on with her life almost as normal. She is a chemical engineer. She's a researcher. Ironically, she does research on cancer drugs. She also is a mother of 2. She's a wife. And I just saw the isolation that she felt due to a lack of community, of knowing others, who were experiencing a similar journey as her. So really, while my entry into my role as the ED at Dear Jack Foundation was pretty broad at the beginning, it's really become more personal for me in the last couple of years. So.
Got it. Well, thank you for sharing that about your friend.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to hear that. And no need to apologize to get emotional with it. That is for sure. I know that it hits you at times you don't expect it to, right?
Yeah.
And it is the irony sometimes where somebody that is working on cancer drugs or an oncologist or a nurse, whatever, right? And they're the ones that get diagnosed. It just blows my mind every time. It's horrible when anybody gets cancer, but when you hear about people that are already working on that as well, we lost a friend who was a researcher at Vanderbilt a long time ago, a good friend of ours. It's been a long time. But anyways, thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
In regards to the personal side of things, right? And I think
absolutely.
Yeah. And everybody doesn't always hear that side of it sometimes, and I think that it just goes to show when you're in a niche like this, the AYA space, we do it because we're passionate about it. And thank you for sharing both sides of it for you. Kayla, how about you?
Yeah, so my name is Kayla Fulginiti. I'm the director of programs for Dear Jack, and I had to think about it. I've been with Dear Jack for a little over a year. I signed on last March. Before that, my background, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been working in hospital oncology since about 2007. I always knew for some reason that I wanted to work in hospitals. I just didn't know what role I wanted to have in a hospital. I just knew that that's where I was supposed to be. And early on in my undergrad, I found social work and decided that that's exactly where I was going to go. And again, very early on knew that I was going to work with cancer patients. That was just, we've got a family history of it. That's how I think for me, it became personal, but there was just, it was a calling. I don't know what it was that said, this is where I was supposed to be. When I was thinking about it because of the question. And so I was thinking about it last night and the kind of journey I've taken to end up here. When I first started, I knew 100% that I was going to work in geriatrics. I wanted to work with senior adults. I loved their life stories. I loved what they had to share. I thought I could learn so much from them. And I was doing my internship at a cancer hospital in Florida. And I was in the sarcoma clinic and was assigned to an 18-year-old young man with osteosarcoma who they needed to refer to hospice. And nobody knew how to talk to him about it. Just nobody. They looked to me and said, we just don't know what to do. We need somebody to go talk to him and be there for him. And that was the turning point for me where I said, nope, I'm not going to work with geriatrics anymore. Young adults is exactly where I want to be because like Andrea, I just felt called to the underserved and the gap. And since then, that has just been my passion. In every hospital I've worked at, I've tried to push that agenda forward and develop programs and resources for young adults and the young adult community, and was lucky enough to join Dear Jack and kind of put all of my passions together in one place, and I'm just happy to have this job now and be able to do what I love.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Kayla. And this is the second interview in a row that we've heard that from someone. David was one of them. Victor sent from Trex last week. Similar situation where he wasn't necessarily planning on working with young adults with cancer, but once he started to do that, he's a psychosocial PhD at Northwestern. Once he started doing clinical rounds and stuff with young adults too, it was like, this is where I need to be and want to be. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting the pull that this community has. Obviously for me, Steve was that pull, having a sibling going through cancer and still going through cancer with it. But it's just weird, right? When you see someone that age, our age, right, or younger, that gets hit with it, and that we want to help in any way that we possibly can. Mm-hmm. So thank you both. Thank you both for sharing it and opening up on the personal side of everything there. So let's spin it over into the Dear Jack side of things, right? I'm familiar with Dear Jack. Kayla and we've been working together on that Mind, Body, and Soul series with the Kuna Loft. So we've really been having a blast with it and making fun of each other, and our last names are so fun to say.
And I feel like you're my travel buddy every time I see you. Like,
that too,
I've
right?
missed you a lot because of all of this cancellation, but every conference I'd go to, I'd be like, Nick.
Yeah, right, because you were there in Cleveland at the Cleveland Clinic too.
Could have hung out.
I think there was one at MD Anderson, right? The two of you were getting coffee. I walked right by you, and I think I did like a double take. Wait a minute, I know them.
Yeah. We're always there.
Always, right? And I don't want to speak for Steve like we talked about. I was about to speak for him. I'm familiar with Dear Jack and what goes on. I'm not sure actually how familiar Steve is with all the ins and outs of Dear Jack too. So I'm sure he'll have some questions. I know, Kayla, he grilled you about Andrea McMahon already before we started. But you got it right. So if Andrew's going to watch this, you got it right. But why don't you tell everybody that's listening to this and us as well, what Dear Jack is all about. And I know you guys have two main programs that you run, but why don't you tell us a little about Dear Jack and all the great things about it?
Kayla, I'll start with giving a little broad overview, and then if you want to dive into just talking about our programs a little bit more specifically. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Yeah, so on the broad level, as many people know, but many people at the same time may not know, we were founded by singer-songwriter Andrew McMahon. If you're not familiar with him, he is the front man of bands Something Corporate, Jack's Mannequin, and most recently Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness. And he founded the organization in 2006 after his own battle with leukemia. He just realized, as many of the viewers of this interview know from firsthand experience, just what a gap in services there is for the AYA demographic, as he personally experienced through his own treatment and battle with leukemia. He was diagnosed when he was 21. He had a life-saving bone marrow transplant through a donation from his sister that ultimately saved his life. And he just really felt a true calling to really be a spokesperson and a voice behind this cause. And so out of that, back in 2006, grew the Dear Jack Foundation. It's really been we've taken a 180 over the last few years as far as not necessarily our mission, but as far as our programming goes. Up until about 4 years ago, we raised money and gave it away to really deserving, like-minded charities within this space. But really, Andrew, over the course of, really since 2006, had this vision of creating his own programs and, really identifying like, where's the gap within this space and how can we fill it? And so out of that grew over the last 4 years, our two programs, Breathe Now and Life List, which Kayla, do you want to talk a little bit about those two?
Yeah, absolutely. So Breathe Now is a program that is geared towards survivors and their romantic partner. So it was created out of the idea that couples are kind of a subset also of this forgotten population. So not only are they young adults, but it is a couple. So focusing on them as a unit, not just the patient, but also now the caregiver, as they move into survivorship. So it is a 4-day wellness retreat where we take the couples to a beautiful resort in the country, somewhere in the country. Right now we're in Arizona and here in Colorado. And we use yoga, meditation. We have a clinician available that does psychosocial breakouts that are scheduled. We do a nutrition session. We go on hikes together. And the overall sense is to kind of use the transformational powers of all of those outlets as a way to help them transition from that patient and caregiver role that they were potentially in for quite a while into kind of that relationship and what that looks like in this new space and how do they define their relationship now as survivors. We want couples or ask them to be about 1 to 3 years post-treatment so that everyone is in that survivorship realm. But it really is amazing, I think, for us as facilitators just to watch it and watch how the couples grow and change. And they also connect with other couples that are there. So we have ideally 6 couples at each retreat, so 12 people to create that sense of community for them. So it's been awesome just as a facilitator to watch the growth that they get to have through Breathe Now. And then our Life List program is a wish granting program. So we pick up pretty much where Make-A-Wish or kind of pediatric wish granting programs stop. So we create a program that gives a currently active patient an opportunity to wish for things that can give them hope and give them happiness and put a smile on their face. And that can be anything from, building a play set in the backyard for their kids so that they can sit out and watch, to going on a family trip or a vacation somewhere, to an iPad that they can use for kind of recreation while they're getting chemo in the hospital. So that's really where we get to know our patients in active treatment and kind of get to brainstorm and be creative with them about ways that we can give them hope and something to look forward to while they're in the midst of all of it.
Very cool. Are there any stipulations when it comes to the life list? Getting tongue tied there. Speaking of sound bites, right? No. Are there any stipulations or things that would qualify or not qualify someone to be a part of that? I guess, are there any questions? What are, I guess, like the FAQs that you get for people to, I guess, not even just life list, but the Breathe Now programs as well, that would be good for people to know?
Yeah, so for Life List, the age requirement is 18 to 39. They have to have a cancer diagnosis and they have to be undergoing active treatment. The application process is currently a quarterly system. So things obviously changed a little bit with the pandemic, but when all things are up and running, we do a quarterly application that they can access online. We have frequently in the past used our hospital partners throughout the country to make those referrals, but patients are now able to go online and access those applications themselves. So those are really the main ones when it comes to Life List. As far as the wish itself, they are given a $2,000 budget to create those wishes with, and that's something that myself and my colleague Susan, who is our Life List coordinator, work with them on. So sometimes we get people that are like, I don't know what I want to wish for, but I want to go somewhere. And Susan and I will help them kind of narrow that down or figure it out, or we'll talk to them about their interests and the things they like to do. And so it doesn't even need to be a specific wish that they might be wishing for. It's just they know that it would be helpful and beneficial for them to have something to look forward to. And then that's where we get to be a little creative with Life List. And then Breathe Now, we do up the age a little bit. So we ask that couples be 21 to 39 years old, and that they are 1 to 3 years post-treatment for that program.
Got it. Very cool. No, go ahead, Steve.
No, so I was going to ask with the couples retreats, and I mean, obviously, you know, when you're trying to change programs or have programming, you look and see what's already out there and what's not out there. What led what led Dear Jack to do this specifically with couples?
So it kind of goes back to a lot of conversations with Andrew and his wife Kelly. So Kelly and Andrew were high school sweethearts. They've been together, you know, for many, many years, and they were together throughout, with maybe some breakups in between, but together mostly throughout you know, his treatment and his diagnosis. And really throughout that time, Kelly really felt like as his caregiver, she didn't really have a voice. And they also felt together as a couple that they were lacking resources holistically as a couple for them to navigate not only Andrew's treatment, but also survivorship together. You know, I think so many people within this community, we've all heard them say, or they've personally experienced, like, okay, you're cancer free. And then all of a sudden, like, their caregiver and the survivor is supposed to just be all well and go back to their normal lives. Well, we all know, especially here on this call today, that that's not true. And I think Kelly really felt that she was, you know, lacking the resources as a caregiver to move forward together with Andrew and their survivorship and how to go about that. So it was really just a lot of conversations with Kelly and Andrew about, okay, what were they missing, you know, so many years ago when they were going through this together that would have helped them, you know, from that point through up until today. And it was really like programming that really took a look at the couple holistically and provided resources for the couple as a whole versus just a retreat for survivors or just a retreat for caregivers, which I believe there's space for that too. But really the idea of like creating a holistic space for the couple, for the caregiver and the survivor we felt that no other organizations were necessarily offering something in this realm. And so that's how Breathe Now was born, with the couple approach to it.
That's really awesome, because I know, as my brother Nick can attest to, and we're going to be kind of talking about later on in June, actually later on in June this weekend. But talking about perspective,
which will be the past weekend by the time this airs.
by the time this airs, yeah, gosh. But talking about perspective and how, especially from personal experience, being in a relationship post-cancer, there are a lot of issues that come up that are on both sides of the relationship, and from the caregiver and the survivor. I think it's really cool that you guys kind of fill in that space, because it's definitely something that does not exist out there. And especially for couples, there's a lot of caretaker and survivor trips, but very few couples trips. And it's good for everybody in a relationship to understand where the other person's coming from, because at the end of the day, I'm not inside your head and you're not inside mine. So that's really wonderful that you guys do that.
Yeah.
Well, and just to add to that too, I didn't, first of all, I didn't realize that was the basis of why it was started. So it's awesome that was why it was started with Andrew and his wife. And one of the things that Steve's mentioning that him and I are going to be talking about during CancerCon's event this weekend, which will be this past weekend, the whole time warp game. But it is how long it took just for like siblings to figure it out of how our relationship was and how our relationship where the direction needed to go. It took us a while. And I know that there's a whole other level with the love aspect, not love aspect, but the intimacy aspect of it. Because clearly we love each other as brothers, but there's that whole intimacy side of things that you don't have as a brother, that as with your partner or your spouse, I mean, that's, it's a whole other level of figuring things out. So that's very cool. How many years has that been going now for?
Oh gosh. So we had our first retreat in Laguna, California in 2017. So
you guys have great locations. If I do recall from it's like, oh, can I come with you just to be on the very cool. Very cool. And do you both attend those as well to kind of lead the programs, or how does that work?
Yeah, so Kayla, now that Kayla's on board, and we have just her fantastic skill set in the sense that she's a clinical licensed social worker, she does attend all of them. I attended all of them up until we brought Kayla on. And, it's as we grow as an organization, we can't be everywhere at one time. Not attending those retreats is it's hard for me not to go, just because, as Kayla mentioned earlier, it's just so wonderful to see the impact that the programming and the facilitators have on the couples, and see the transition from day 1 to day 4 is just remarkable. But yeah, no, Kayla has the opportunity to attend all the retreats. We do, Kayla will be starting to facilitate the psychosocial sessions as well. We also have other clinical psychologists and social workers that we team up with to help facilitate the retreats as well. So
very cool.
Yeah.
And then Kayla, does Tara, who did the yoga session for the Mind, Body, and Soul, is she there for those too?
Yes, so that's who I was going to mention. Tara does all of our yoga. She also came on board just this last session for Breathe Now. And so it's been really neat to see somebody consistently be able to facilitate the yoga sessions each morning. So we do yoga every morning and we do a meditation in the evenings. And her skill set as it relates to yoga specifically for cancer patients and survivors is remarkable. And I think her skills and assets and what she brings just makes it awesome.
Yeah, I know from just, and I am not a yoga person at all. And my brother Steve knows about this. I'll admit here in front of these people that on that Mind, Body, and Soul series, I just closed you didn't see me. I was there, but there was no yoga going on, which is not my thing. But with that said, the feedback we heard from people on Tara's session was that she just gets it, and it takes her time with everybody too. And I think that's very important for, especially for someone like myself, if I ever wanted to do it, who's inexperienced with yoga. But then if you add on top of someone who's like me, but then they have issues from cancer or surgeries or whatever the case may be, you just seem to really understand what everybody's going through. And I know from a personal standpoint, for her losing her husband, talk about a perfect match when it comes to relating to the people in the room for your Breathe Now retreats too, which is pretty cool.
And that's the thing that's awesome about Breathe Now, is that there's no requirement for yoga experience or meditation or nutrition or anything. There's come as you are, come as never having done yoga before, come as doing it every day. What we really just want couples to experience is the potential to have another tool in their tool belt that they can use and access. So it's really about, and we talk about it a lot on the first night, like just being open. That's really all that we ask of the couples, is to be open and try something new. And not every single thing at the retreat might work for you. It might work for your partner. But to really just be open to it and kind of see what happens. And that's just been neat to see too, is of people that came in and sat down that first morning on the yoga mat and were like, I don't want to do this. I don't do this. This isn't what I do. And then the last day they're like, I'm going to do this when I get home. This has been so great. I'm going to do it every morning. It's like, okay, ease into it, baby. But yes, that's great.
I think like Kayla and I talk a lot about, at the end of the day, if the couples take away one thing from the retreat, whether it's a tidbit that they learned from the psychosocial breakout sessions, or whether it's a new yoga pose, or whether it's some information that they took from the nutrition breakout, or whether it's just the idea of the healing power of being around other couples who have experienced a similar journey, whatever it is that they take away one thing, then we feel like we're doing our part, so.
Awesome. What is for both of you, what's your favorite part about those retreats? If you had to pick one thing.
Yeah. I think there's so many. I think if I had to pick one thing, I think the organic conversations that the couples take part in when eating meals together. So all of our meals at the retreat are in a private location. They're not in a public space. And so I think just like the immediate connection that these couples seem to have with one another, despite never having met one another before walking in the room. And then these like organic and just open, heartfelt, trusting conversations that take place around the table just almost immediately. I think that's my favorite part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking that, and also for me, just the openness and the vulnerability that they all come in with, that they might not think that they feel that way when they show up. They might be very nervous and anxious and they don't know what to expect, but the fact that they showed up and that they're trying something new and maybe out of their comfort zone, I think is just really remarkable and speaks to their strength as people that want to grow, and the power that they have within their own relationship, and that they've dedicated that time to each other to step away from everything else going on in their life, jobs, kids, family, everything, and they've devoted that time to come for each other is a very special thing to witness.
Very cool. Very cool. Steve, anything else you wanted to add to that there?
No, man. You always throw me on the spot.
I'm just making sure I don't continue to just dominate the conversation is all, brother. So, no, that's great. And I can't speak highly enough on what you both do, what the organization does with those Breathe Now retreats. The Life List, of course, as well. But the Breathe Now retreats, I think, as you were saying, Andrea, there's nothing like this really out there, at least not that I'm aware of, where there's retreats specifically for the couples, the partners, right? And I think that this is such a topic that's not talked about enough. I know one of the things that we always talk about, caregivers, there's not a whole lot of support still for caregivers out there. There's definitely no support for siblings out there. And I never even hear it talked about the partners or the spouses or whoever, right? It's never even a conversation. I think the only time I've been to a conference in the past 2 years that it's even come up was at YSC at a breast cancer conference. And even then, it still wasn't talked about as much, I think, as it should have. So it's kudos for you guys for having such an awesome program that does focus on that. So pivoting a little bit, the big thing that we love to talk about here is the elephant in the room with us being, yeah, see, I know Steve just sent me a note. Can you guys still see me okay? I'm having some issues, it looks like.
I can see
Okay.
you. Mm-hmm.
Hopefully I don't get booted off again, so we're just gonna have to go with it. You can see me, great. That's a good thing. It's a good start. And the whole time when Kayla started talking again, it was like starting to be all choppy on my end. So I'm like, what's going on? Is it me? Sorry, that was a total like me. The
Typical
elephant
tangent.
in the room. What's that?
The typical tangent for Nick.
I have to just go with it. It's the Greek in me. So for those that aren't familiar with elephants and tea saying it, cancer is the elephant in the room and tea is the relief the conversation provides. What we like to ask people that come on with us what their elephant in the room is, that is maybe a conversation or a topic that isn't talked about enough or should get some more conversation around it. So well, I can start with Kayla or Andrea, or if you both want to go, by all means, but what would you consider is the elephant in the room for you personally, Kayla? Or
Kayla,
Andrea?
do you want me to go first, or do you want to go?
I think Nick punted it to me, so
Okay.
I
Put me on the
threw
spot.
Andrea to start this whole thing off earlier on, so I figured it was
Yep.
fair to throw it to Kayla now.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I read the question, because you kind of sent that to us and I've been thinking about it, I wanted to go kind of gut reaction, like what my first, like that's mine. And I think then through that, it kind of started to develop into something else. So my first initial thought was that for me, I feel like the elephant in the room is literally the other person in the room, whether that's caregiver, romantic partner, mom, brother, friend. I think specifically as it relates to the young adult community, that person can change throughout the course of somebody's treatment, and that sometimes it's their best friend who is now coming to sit with them at bedside, or somebody doesn't have a family, so they're leaning on a friend to, kind of bunk on their couch while they're dealing with side effects, or it's a romantic partner that's now stepped into this role. And I think that there's oftentimes the focus so much on the patient, understandably so. However, there is usually some type of support system that is often trying to help that individual through this. And sometimes that person can be overlooked or seen as doing okay, since they're not the person kind of in the bed or dealing with the physical, visible symptoms of what's going on. And I think for me, that was my initial response, but in part then I also started to transition into one of my favorite topics, and people don't ever talk about it or get really uncomfortable talking about it, is sexual health and the sexuality and intimacy of our cancer patients and survivors, both during and after as they move into survivorship. So I think for me, it's kind of this culmination of like relationships in general, as being things that aren't necessarily talked about or expressed, or maybe even felt like they can be asked about because nobody's giving permission to ask about it. It's for me, I feel like in my clinical role, I was always the one to be comfortable being uncomfortable with those conversations, and would be fine with somebody, wanting to talk about, not being able to get turned on, or their partner really wants to have sex and they don't, and how do they manage those conversations together. And I think it's something that we just often shy away from, but it's such a reality for young adults that I feel like it needs more attention.
Love it. Both are fantastic answers. And just to have some commentary, there's a writer who has her own blog. She also writes for us too. Her name's Allison. Her last name, because the B is escaping me at the moment. but she has a website called, for her blog, negativespace.life. And I'm going to confirm that. But basically her comment, Kayla, goes to your first elephant in the room. And that is that when you look at a negative space image, you always focus on that middle point, on what's the focus, but you don't focus on what's actually around it that actually makes that image stand up. And she's a caregiver for her husband. And so it was just it was just kind of a light bulb to me on your first elephant, on how people don't see the peripheral of what's going on, that other person in the room or the family in the room or whatever the support system is for that person. And I thought it was a very cool way for her to show that, hey, there's more going on in this picture. And without the support system, the negative space, as she calls it, you don't have that middle necessarily. So I thought it was very interesting. And she makes it very clear that, what the patient's going through is much different than what the caregiver's going through, but it's still very serious, right?
Mm-hmm. And I feel like for young adults, that relationship is so dynamic of who that other person could be. For pediatrics, 90% of the time it's going to be a parent who's there at bedside and who's there 24/7. But I feel like for young adults, the possibilities of who that relationship could be one day could potentially change the next day, but that doesn't mean that person is being impacted any less because they're not there every day. I just feel like for this specific population, it's an interesting thing to be aware of that kind of door that potentially many people could walk through as a caregiver. Might not always be the case, as I know the flip side of that is that many young adults feel like they lose a lot of those connections while going through treatment and survivorship. But that, I feel like, it should still be something that you can explore to see who is supporting this person outside of their own, maybe a little familial bubble.
And to speak to your second elephant, I from personal experience, I was in a long-term relationship with someone, and even though I wasn't necessarily in active treatment at the time, there was this constant thought of me being frail or fragile, and and so it's a very important thing for people to be able to talk about that, because it's definitely something that comes up, regularly. Yeah. And I have fellow cancer patients or friends who have experienced similar issues in their relationships.
Mm-hmm. And being able to know that that's normal, and then that's okay to be able to talk about it. Because I think sometimes the fear is that, one, it's uncomfortable, or the person I might ask is uncomfortable with it, so then I don't really want to ask that person about it. But then it's just kind of awkward, in general to talk about. But I feel like if we can do a better job of bringing it up and normalizing it and just throwing it in conversation the same way you would take somebody's blood pressure, let's just normalize these conversations, the comfort level is there. Mm-hmm. And I think even when you go right to diagnosis and the whole conversations of fertility preservation, and are we having those consistently enough with young adults, I think we're doing better. I think we're getting there, but I think there's still plenty of opportunities to continue to develop fertility preservation options. And when we have those conversations and having them early on and having them with everybody, regardless of maybe what somebody thinks the situation is with that patient, we should be asking.
Agreed. And it's always been a very something that's been, for us, a topic that we always want to make sure we cover from an elephants and teas side of things. Every issue, we have a phenomenal writer, Marlo Esch is her name, who talks about different taboo topics that most people don't want to cover. And even, I think we all giggle a little bit at some of the topics, but it's real, it's serious, right? And, she went into a whole conversation, a whole article about lube, essentially, and what to look for, what to avoid. And it was eye-opening, again, for someone like myself who's haven't been in that situation, but it's real stuff. And I think it's something that isn't talked about enough. And when we were at CancerCon last year, we actually had a table behind us. I forget the company name, but it was essentially the sex toys was directly behind us. But it was a popular table, and kudos for them for actually being there, because people had legit concerns and questions because they don't feel comfortable talking to their doctor, right? That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. And all you have to do, I mean, to go back to your organization and your name, Elephants and Tea, all you have to do is invite the elephant in. Somebody has to invite it in order to be able to talk about it. Otherwise, it just sits there and nobody addresses it.
I like this. I'm going to write that one down. I think we could use that.
I have an image in my head right now.
Oh, so many things are
An
popping
elephant
in my
stuck in the
brain.
doorway of a house trying to get in.
Oh, man. Are you seeing that a marketer, Kayla?
That's my visual. That's my visual for you.
Awesome.
Like the trunk through the door.
Yeah.
Waving, let me in.
Swinging it back and forth. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Andrea, have fun following that elephant up.
Yeah.
Literally.
Kayla's always a tough act to follow, but so my I kind of went a little bit different direction with my elephant. Without talking to Kayla specifically what we were going to talk about before hopping on this call, I had a hunch she might go that direction. But really, I think my background is, before I got in the nonprofit sector, was business, and so a lot of the ways that I think about how to go about growing and running Dear Jack comes from a business perspective. And, the conversation within the cancer space, there's so many just wonderful AYA organizations out there doing so many different things and offering so many different resources within this space. Some of those resources are a little bit duplicate from organization to organization. And so I think just within the AYA cancer space on the organizational level, a big elephant in the room is this concept of collaboration versus duplication. And I personally would love to see more collaboration across the AYA space versus duplication. I think a great example of a success story is working with you guys, Elephants and Tea, recently in the Kuna Loft on the Mind and Body Soul digital series. I think not only did that series together, we were able to offer a very effective and needed resource during a difficult time, but we're also, each of us, be able to expand our reach and introduce our individual organizations to other patients and survivors and caregivers and their family members who may not have known about Dear Jack or Elephants and Tea or Lacuna Loft. So I just feel like this concept, there's this huge elephant within this space around the idea of collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Completely agree. And, I guess a fun fact for I think Kayla and Steve, the fact that you and I, Andrea, came from a very similar background with the publishing world.
Yeah.
But I couldn't agree with you more. The duplication, or even not just a collaboration, when people just want to do give and takes as well versus actual collaboration,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where, kind of like, oh, scratch my back, I scratch yours, which is great. Like those type of situations are totally fine and needed. But I think that the bigger tasks, the bigger things, like we're doing, like you said, the Mind, Body, and Soul series, you're actually having an action item on collaborating and bringing the audiences to each other. And I think that is going to strengthen the community as a whole and not just one individual organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
mean, I think we're all in this for the same reason, to be able to close the gap and offer resources, very much needed resources, to an underserved demographic, which is the AYA cancer community. And I just would love to see more leaders at the table to have this discussion at some point in the future. So,
Agreed.
Yeah.
Completely agree. And yes, I'm with you all there all the way, my friend. It was a glaring. This was something very glaring when I started Elephants and Tea almost 2 years ago, or when we were looking at starting Elephants and Tea 2 years ago. And even still today, I just kind of laugh at how some people, they just, for whatever reason, won't collaborate.
oh, sorry about that.
All good. Your dog?
I think it was the wind blowing my door shut.
But no, I agree with everything you said, and it's definitely a glaring elephant. It seems that like recently there has been more conversation on collaboration. We definitely can do better, and we can definitely improve on it. And I'm hoping that, you know, like we said, the Mind, Body, and Soul series, that's something that we can continue as the three organizations between us and the Middle Loft. I mean, I'm super pumped. And even if it starts small, I think that's the some people forget that they want to just blow the doors off of something. And if it doesn't blow the doors off of something first, it's a failure or something along those lines. You got to start somewhere. And I think it's so cool when you just do something small and just see how it organically grows. Those are the ways to truly engage with people. And that's to build the trust with the community too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Using a lot of buzzwords there. So cool. Anything else to add with the elephants in the room?
Well, I actually have a question for the two of you that I think we just, I forgot to ask earlier on. But what, we know the two programs that you have right now. Is there anything bubbling up that might come up in the coming years for Dear Jack Foundation that you guys are working on that you're willing to spill the beans on, or anything like that?
No pressure.
A matter of fact, Kayla, do you want to talk a little bit about just our soft ideas around expansion for Breathe Now, and maybe even talk about a little bit how we've pivoted what we're offering with Breathe Now to more of a virtual environment during COVID?
Yeah. I think for a lot of us with the pandemic, it allowed us to kind of break out of what we typically do. Andrea and I had many conversations about how it's kind of stretching our brains in different ways. And it's been exciting to kind of flex that muscle and think of different things we can do. So as we look into the future for what Breathe Now could be, and I think even, Andrea, and you can correct me, but even in our supportive programs for our community and what that looks like, not only are we looking at ways to expand some of our virtual programming, but even as it relates to the types of retreats. So we have had some early on discussions about the potential of doing a survivor-only Breathe Now, and also the potential of doing an advanced disease Breathe Now, as we have had many conversations with couples who live more in a state of not if their disease will come back, but when their disease will come back. And that's a much different place to be at than some couples who are experiencing kind of more of an end game when it comes to their treatment and their disease and moving on. So that idea has also been starting to develop and grow as to what that might look like and how that would affect the retreat and the curriculum. But that's super exciting for us to be able to grow that piece of it. Because of the pandemic, we have transitioned some of our programming to online, offering some of that connection. And we've had a lot of conversations about what Dear Jack has been in the past. And I think, Nick, you mentioned it perfectly when you said that sometimes we want to see a really big success from the start, and that if we don't see that, it's not successful, or we don't view it as successful. And we internally have been having conversations about a culture shift for Dear Jack, and that if we want to really kind of encourage a sense of community through the Dear Jack people and who we have involved, then we need to start small, and we need to start shifting the culture for our community to realize that we're here for this piece of it as well. We're here for the social gatherings, the Netflix parties, the Zoom safari that we're doing. We're going to be doing some other virtual kind of educational series, but it's going to take a culture shift because it's not something that Dear Jack has typically done in the past. So that's something exciting for us. And we're hoping by the end of 2020 to do a digital type program for looking at relationships of cancer patients. So having clinicians who are experts provide an educational component and then some type of connection component as it relates to dating as it relates to being a couple and what that looks like. And then also how to talk to kids. How do you talk to your kids about your current disease? How do you talk to your kids about survivorship and all of the things that go with that? So that's something that's also in the works for hopefully by the end of the year too.
Awesome. Very cool. So you guys do have stuff going on, actually. Yeah. Little dabble here, little dabble. I love it. And again, I think you mentioned too the whole stretching the brain during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we probably wouldn't have done that Mind, Body, and Soul series potentially, right? You know, and I think that some of us have done a very good job of looking outside the box because we had to.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for my, you know, the heartache goes out to you and other organizations that have these retreats, right? And you just, our community, we just can't do them right now. So to be able to find ways to do stuff digitally and still connect with the community and support them is crucial. So kudos for you guys for figuring that out. And
okay.
that's some cool stuff. That really is. Steve, anything else there?
No, you guys are doing a lot of really awesome things that have needed to be done for a long time. So I thank you for it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you believe that we've actually been talking for about 50 minutes? Yeah, it's hilarious. I just looked down and I was like, yep, that's about right. I love it. This is what I love about these conversations. Just keep going and going.
Yeah.
But we had to figure out Mind, Body, and Soul series again, which I'm sure we will. But that was a blast. And I'm looking forward to partnering with you guys more and more as we continue on as actual collaboration, right, Andrea?
Yeah.
So not duplication. I might steal that if you want me to put like your name underneath it when I use it. But
you can have it.
Too kind. Sweet. Kayla and Andrea, if people want to find more information about Dear Jack, where should they go?
Yeah, they can head to our website at dearjackfoundation.org. I'll happily throw my email out there. I'm at andrea@dearjackfoundation.org. And Kayla is at kayla@dearjackfoundation.org. So yeah, please reach out to us with any questions, needs, concerns. We would love to hear from you. So
awesome. Ladies, any parting thoughts today that we didn't cover that you wanted to throw out there?
I don't think so. I just appreciate being involved. And I know Andrea and I are both really thankful and appreciate you guys creating this space. And I've watched your other interviews with other partners and have been learning about them and learning new things. So I think not only is it something that you're doing that's important for potential patients, survivors, and that type of community, but for the nonprofits themselves to learn about each other too, and open it up to start those conversations of like, oh, I heard you talk about this on Spilling Tea with the G's. I need to ask you about this. I've got some lists already of names I'm reaching out to.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you both so much for being here today. It's been a blast. It's been a privilege and a pleasure. And keep up the good work and stay safe while you're out there.
thank you. You guys too.
All righty. Take care, everybody. And again, reminder to folks, subscribe to our channel so you can get updates when the new videos come out every week. This was episode 7. We clarified that, not 6. My goodness. Episode 8 will be the following week. Our guest will be a surprise when it's launched. So again, thank you all so much. I'm Nick Galarakis. And this guy is Steve. And he said bye. I always like to catch him off guard. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy. Check out Dear Jack Foundation at dearjackfoundation.org. I got it right, Andrea?
Yep, you absolutely did. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
All right, everybody.
Thanks,
have a great
guys.
day. Take care.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.